Jai Hind and hello all. Welcome to yet another episode of CNSS Podcast. As China drafts its 15th five-year plan, a strategic blueprint shaping the nation's development over 7 decades, we explore how these plans reflect high-level policy priorities and what to anticipate for 2026 to 2030. The year 2025 marks the end of the 14th five-year plan and the lead up to the 15th, which will guide China's trajectory through the next decade. President Xi Jinping is engaging senior officials to define key priorities while state media gather public input ahead of the CPC Central Committee's expected approval this fall. This plan will serve as a key indicator of China's long-term policy goals, which will be unveiled in 2026. Joining us to discuss this is our esteemed guest, Lieutenant General S L Narasimhan, whose insights will shed light on the strategic roadmap to be unveiled in 2026 and its impact on China's global trajectory. To introduce our speaker, Lieutenant General S L Narasimhan, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, served in the Indian Army for 40 years and worked extensively on the India-China border. He served as a defense attaché at the Embassy of India in China and is qualified in the Chinese language. He is a former member of the National Security Advisory Board where, during his 3 tenures, he focused extensively on topics related to China. He was also the first Director General of the Center for Contemporary China Studies, a policy-oriented inter-ministerial think tank of the Government of India for 5 years. To begin with, let me thank Lieutenant General S L Narasimhan for his spontaneous willingness to do this podcast. Thank you very much, sir, for taking your busy and tight schedule and for agreeing to do a podcast with us.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
To open the discussion, so today China is in the early drafting phase of its 15th five-year plan. Expectations do center on a shift from having the high-speed growth to strategic endurance, which emphasizes resilience and technological self-reliance. We come across, constantly keywords like in the Chinese media, like rebalancing supply-demand dynamics, fostering new quality productive forces through AI and high-tech industries, and of course, expanding domestic consumption via subsidies and social security enhancements, which projects GDP growth rate targeting 4.5 to 5%. Basing these, how do you read all these developments and what are your thoughts on these?
Some time ago, there was a realization that China's growth cannot sustain the double-digit growth that it has been experiencing for about more than 3 decades. So thereafter, there was a realization that they need to look at the new normal. When Mr. Xi Jinping came to power, he is talking about new normal. A new normal means you need to get adjusted to low growth rates, but sustainable growth rates is what that meant. And over a period of time, if you look at it, the Chinese rate of growth has come down to approximately 5%. The first half of this year, the growth was 5.3%. So this is the trend that you will get to see for next few years to come. And it may further go down to anywhere between 3 to 4%, because many of the fully developed economies also grow not beyond 2 to 3%. You look at US, you look at other Western economies, none of them grow beyond 2 to 3%. So that is the general growth rate of developed economies. And China is slowly coming to a developed economy status. And therefore, with the GDP of $19 trillion, if it grows at about anywhere between 4 to 5%, it will involve a growth of $720 to $900 billion in a year, which is a good amount of growth. So generally what happens is people get fooled by the percentage growth of 5%, 4%, etc. I think we need to look at the base on which is growing. That means on $19 trillion, 4% is still a good amount of growth. So that is one thing that they would like to sustain. That is one. Second thing is, there has been an effort to have internal corrections within that economy. Like, for example, you would have realized in 2021, there was a real estate bust. And that has affected the economy badly because real estate contributes to approximately 29% of the GDP of China. So over a period of last 3 to 4 years, they have been trying to ensure that some amount of support is given to that sector and that sector is kickstarted again. So if you take your mind back to the Central Economic Work Conference in December last year, they had mentioned that they are going to give out approximately $411 billion worth of long-term bonds to ensure that some of the loans are taken care of and some money is left with the provinces to take on new projects. So these are the kind of things I think they will do. And they will also do some internal fiscal corrections and other things regarding lending patterns, etc. So that is something you can get to see in the coming year, also in the 15th five-year plan, basically to ensure that the growth is sustained at this level. Plus, there is a lot of effort on innovation in China. Develop the science and technology related issues. There will be a lot of effort on innovation. They feel that innovation is the way to go for sustaining growth in future. So these are the trends that you can get to see in the 15th five-year plan.
Speaking of innovation, developed economy status, how do you think China's 15th five-year plan will address the anticipated what they call as a long-term contest with the US, particularly in response to potential US trade restrictions and technological decoupling?
See, the US trade restrictions are actually not been biting China very well. Basically, because initially when Mr. Trump came to power in his second term, he talked about increasing the tariff rates to 145%. But ultimately, he has brought it down to 30%. Okay. So obviously, 10%, of course, is across the board, is levied every country. And in addition, another 20% was charged. However, over a period of time, China's export to US has reduced by one third since Trump's first term. But the trade deficit continues to remain about 295 to $300 billion of US. So obviously, even though the trade levels have come down, the trade deficit seems to be still very high. That is one aspect in this relationship. Second is the technological denial regime that US is trying to put across, basically not to allow China to grow technologically and becoming a competitor subsequently. That my own feeling is that it can only delay the progress of China, but it can't deny the progress of China. So it could delay, but however, Chinese have taken enough corrective measures to start developing things indigenously. They have a talent acquisition program running from where they get the talent from worldwide to come and work in China and produce the technological advancements that they are looking at. So it can delay China to an extent, but it can't deny it. So that is one. And second thing is China-US relationship is going to be one of a competitive kind of a relationship, basically because though it is a distant second now, China is still a second economic growth wise. And the third country, which is going to be very close to third biggest economy in the world, is nowhere near China's total economy. So, if at all there is competition to US, that will come from only China. And with the recent technological development that they have demonstrated, it appears that China will give a competition to US in the near future. So, this is going to be a competitive kind of a relationship that that is going to dominate this not only this relationship but also other relationships associated with this relationship.
So, basing all these, what measures do you think will China include to integrate into its national security as a part of its economic strategy, which can counter external shock like supply chain disruptions and sanctions?
You see, I think you need to disaggregate national security from all this. National security today is a very larger concept and not only restricted to economic shocks and things like that. You have traditional security threats, you have non-traditional security threats. All of them combined is going to give you these kind of threat scenarios for the countries. So that is one issue. The second issue is, despite whatever restrictions, despite whatever supply chain disruption that come up, you find there's only one country in the world which is actually disrupting the supply chains of other countries, and that is China. Basically, because whatever the other countries need for their modernization, they need for their economic growth, the supply chain starts and probably finishes in China at this moment. So there are efforts to diversify their supply chain, but it is not going to take overnight. It is going to take a long period of time. So to that extent, even though you may put restrictions on China, China will continue to be the disruptor as far as the economic growth of many countries are concerned. So we need to be very clear about that. And the second issue is about the national security and all this coming into context. As I mentioned, national security is a broader concept at this point in time. There's only one aspect of that which will fit into that matrix. Therefore, China also has to now depend on many other countries and groups of countries to ensure that its economic growth is sustained at some particular level. So there's an interdependency out there. So all these things are going to play into the national security scenario of China. But I get a feeling that they have already worked for themselves a path which they will carry, and they don't seem to be unduly worried about Trump's tariffs and other issues like European Union has imposed 38% tariffs on e-vehicles, etc. I don't think they seem to be very worried about it. I think they seem to be confident and they seem to be sure that they'll be growing at about 5%, which is actually which is normal.
When you look at the writings in the Chinese media today, they speak about shift from high speed economic growth to what they call strategic endurance and sustainable development. What are your thoughts on these, sir?
This is what I explained earlier. See, the gone are the days when you can expect China to grow at 10% and beyond. They do that. They did that for about 3 decades, but that is an unsustainable rate of growth. So you have a problem there. So now that is why they brought in this term new normal, which is actually approximately 5 to 6% growth, which they have been achieving over a period of time. So they have to get used to this lower rate of growth, and that will also ensure the inflation rates become, you know, manageable. Basically, because if you have a high rate of growth, then the rate of inflation will be very high. So to manage that, then you'll have to take corrective measures. So with this kind of a rate of growth, the inflation also can be managed properly.
Speaking of tech, China has been pumping out a lot of heavy investments in AI. 3.3 trillion capex between 25 to 2030. Then semiconductors, aerospace, and AI plus integration across industries. Creating a lot of breakthrough in core tech and basic research. How do you think these investments in AI, semiconductor, aerospace are expected in the 15th five-year plan to achieve technological self-reliance that will shape China's civil, military fusion strategy? And how do you think it will influence its behavior abroad?
Um, I'll come to the behavior abroad subsequently. But if you take your mind back to 2005, I think, 2005 or 2006, when Mr. Hu Jintao put out a 15-year scientific development plan. And they have been going through the implementation of that plan. And that has put them on a little solid footing as far as science and technology development is concerned. However, they've also been working on certain breakthrough technologies. I mean, what they call sunrise technologies, uh, like AI, like quantum technologies, space, and biotechnology, gene technology, etc., etc. So the thing is that they had set for themselves in 10 different sectors, they will become world leaders. That is the start point of Made in China 2025. And they have been working at it. They have had mixed results in the sense that approximately 70 to 80% seems to be the achievement of that particular plan, which is good enough, actually speaking. So in Sunrise Technologies, they have been investing a lot of time and effort, money, and resources for research and development. So they want to be world leaders in certain technologies, which they are working towards. It need not necessarily be disruptive. It may be good, it may be bad. We'll have to wait and see as to how this develops. So therefore, whatever efforts anybody else is doing to contain this growth is, like I said earlier, it can delay it, but it may not be able to deny it. So that is the way we need to see these growth technologies. And in some of these technologies, they are already very close to the US level of development. So that is why I said there will be competitive kind of a relationship between the US and China. These are the factors that will lead to it.
Behavior abroad?
Behavior abroad, during COVID, if you had noticed, they did something known as the wolf warrior diplomacy, wherein they were very aggressive in their diplomatic behavior in many countries. But you would have seen off late that has softened up. The reason for that is Xi Jinping has mentioned some time ago, around 2021, he mentioned by 2035, they want China to be a soft power superpower. So if soft power superpower has to be displaying an aggressive behavior. So wherever their core interests are concerned, you can see an aggressive behavior. But in other areas, they'll approach a softer approach and ensure that China is increasingly getting liked for whatever it is.
China today positions itself as a green leader. It even asserts its solar and EV export numbers. It even offers opportunities in carbon trading, etc. So, what strategy you think Beijing is adopting to achieve a 10% emissions reduction by 2030 and advance its decarbonization efforts in industries and energy sectors?
We were recently in China and interacting with a couple of organizations which are dealing with this. What they said was actually interesting. China had declared that by 2030, its carbon emission will peak, and by 2060, it will become carbon neutral. However, what they told us was that by 2028, that is 2 years ahead of time, they'll be able to achieve the target, the first target. And they say that they have been working on this to increase the solar power and other renewable energy sources, etc. And even this dam that they are trying to construct in Great Bend area on the Brahmaputra, that is supposed to produce three times the electricity of Three Gorges Dam, which amounts to approximately 85 gigawatts of power. So when that flows into the grid, automatically the thermal power generation will go down to some extent. So they are taking many measures basically to reduce the carbon emission and also to become a green kind of economy. And they are confident that they'll be able to do it within the time frame that they have stipulated with themselves.
So, speaking of foreign affairs, what diplomatic initiatives China is pursuing with Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia to offset tensions with the US presently, and what can we expect in the coming days? And how do you think this will impact India?
You see, I don't think you should look at this as a China-US kind of a relationship, which is actually uh, transposing itself into other relationships that China has got. But that will lead you to certain wrong conclusions because you don't know how the US will behave with those countries over a period of time. So therefore, you should look at simply as to how China is going to behave with these countries. One thing that is clear is China has announced a number of global initiatives, starting from Global Initiative on Data Security in September 2020. Then in September 21, they came out with Global Development Initiative. April 22, they came out with Global Security Initiative. And then Global Civilization Initiative, Proposal for Reform and Development of Global Governance, Global Artificial Intelligence Governance Initiative, Global Initiative for Global Community for Shared Future, and lastly, of course, they have come out with Global Governance Initiative. So, by all this, what they intend to do is to create an alternative model to what the model is existing at this point in time in global governance, which probably they would like to dominate, definitely. And they have always been saying all these initiatives will be done under the UN Charter. Because UN Charter gives them the cover to push all these agenda. And with people positioned correctly in the United Nations, they'll be able to push these agendas very clearly. So therefore, you will find China's efforts with all these countries that you mentioned will be on these global initiatives that they will be trying to achieve over a period of time.
My last question to you, sir: how do you think will China refine its economic structure through the 15th five-year plan to strengthen multilateral engagement, particularly within forums like SEO, BRICS, and Global South amid global disagreements? And what prescription do you offer for India?
Um, the kind of process that China will go through after the 15th five-year plan. 15th five-year plan is basically on development. Okay, the five-year plans of China are basically based on developmental activities that they need to undertake, and many of the projects that are undergoing at this point in time, they will continue. That is one thing that we can be sure of. Second thing I think we need to get together and think about is probably they will try and smoothen out their financial system, fiscal system. that they have been postponing for a long period of time. So that they may probably try and do that. The third thing that they may try and work on is the de-dollarization, because the global dominance of dollar actually makes countries vulnerable to sanctions. The sanctions are going to be in terms of dollars. So countries have been finding ways and means of moving away from the dollar. You will find a lot of currency swap agreements taking place, group of countries trading within their own currencies like BRICS. So a whole lot of processes are on at this point in time to de-dollarize.
They also came out with CIPS SIPs.
SIPs, of course, came out earlier, not now. It has already come, I think, 5-6 years ago it has come. So SIPs is basically something like a SWIFT for transferring money internationally from one country to other. But now they have gone ahead of that also and introduced something known as digital currency electronic payments. It's a digital currency. By introducing DCEP, what they are trying to do is to reduce the transfer costs. Like if you transfer money by SWIFT, the cost is approximately 9%. Whereas if you do by digital currency electronic payment, it will come down to 1 or 2%. So that is the kind of thing that they're trying to introduce into the system. And also internationalization of the yuan. While de-dollarization is one of the things that they are working on, they're also working on internationalization the yuan. So which means yuan will actually get into more acceptability as a currency throughout the world, slowly and steadily. Of course, it can't happen overnight. It's going to take time. But those are the things that they are working on towards this particular thing. Also, you would have heard about SEO Development Bank that has been announced in the recent Tianjin Summit, Tianjin Declaration. So, like China and other countries have started this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the new development bank, which was earlier known as BRICS Bank. Now they have got a SEO development. So these banks are going to lend money, and they have been actually functioning really well. If you take your mind back, they have been actually following international norms, be open about what loans they are committing, etc. And therefore, these banks are actually increasing in popularity. So, along with these two banks, if SEO also comes up, you will find when the Bretton Woods initially established the systems of World Bank and International Monetary Fund, slowly and steadily these banks will start competing with that. So these are the issues in the next 5 years that we need to continuously watch. And in the multilateral scenario, you will find China will push BRICS definitely and SU, because these are the two things where China's influence will be rather higher, because BRICS also has taken another 5 members, so it has become 10-member organization. Shanghai Cooperation Organization also has expanded, and China being one of the founder members has got a certain amount of leverage there. So you find these organizations will continue to give China the leverage that it can use. In addition, with its influence in UN, I think China will continue to increase its influence across the globe in the next 5 years. At least it will try to do so.
Thank you very much, sir, once again for patiently taking all the questions. And as always, it is insightful and a learning experience to get to know about first-hand inputs on China. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast.